Welcome back, everybody. Today we have the famous Skip Hill with us. What's going on, Skip? How you doing?
Good. Famous. I that's funny. Infamous.
Infamous.
Yeah, maybe infamous, but hey, I'll take whatever. That's
Thanks
cool.
for
I've been
coming
around
on.
a while.
So we were talking earlier about kind of where we see bodybuilding going as a whole. Kind of an interesting thing, right? It's kind of almost coming full circle.
Yeah, and obviously it's quite a broad topic, but one of the things that we were touching on a little bit is, and I think this is important because being in the industry for so long, I've seen a lot happen, and I'm more concerned, honestly. I'm less concerned with where we're going in bodybuilding as far as the competition standpoint, that sort of thing. The evolution of physiques, obviously, from generation to generation, is kind of fun to watch. The next generation is always physically superior psychologically. I'm not real sure. I think our generation has a much better work ethic, and there are motivational factors in there that I think the next generation doesn't have. As an example, they're far more motivated by the attention in the social media. And, I don't know that I wouldn't be either if I were, younger and chasing that attention that way too. But our generation, I think, is just, and this is, every generation says this. So I'm going to sound like an old man when I say it too, but I do think there's truth to it. The work ethic is different. We're going to overtrain long before the next generation is going to overtrain. And honestly, I don't know that doesn't contribute to them having quicker and faster development. They're recovering better because they're not willing to work as hard. That's a blanket statement. There are obviously people who work hard. Don't get me wrong. So I want to be fair to those people. But to see the generation as a whole, the physiques are better. There's no question there. But what variables and what plays into that? And like I said, we have the old man, I call it old man-itis issues, the overuse issues, because we would rather, we enjoy the journey. We enjoy the process, and being in the gym is more important than standing on a stage. I think sometimes there are competitors in our generation who do it not because it's an obligation, but we don't do it to stand on stage and get the trophies and get the accolades and the attention on social media. It's almost kind of a finish line. If you're going to run the race, then you cross the finish line. But it's the process. And I don't see that as much. Doesn't mean that there aren't those people who are motivated by that. But I think that's one of the bigger issues. But what I do like to see, and that I do like the direction that the sport is going, is the people who are getting the attention and the people who influence people. And that's not influencers. It's just people who are in a position to have influence, the Nick Walkers, people like that. They're just all around, they carry themselves better. They're all around better people. There isn't the arrogance, and I guess there's some humility versus hubris. It's just a different, people carry themselves a little bit differently. And I don't know why. Nick, one of the cool things that I like about Nick is he admits that he struggled with social media early on because, of course, he's trolled just at ridiculous levels. And I think even in my age, I would struggle with, and maybe I would move through it as well. I used to get bashed, after articles and stuff. And, I am from the message board, so we have a little bit thicker skin. So there's that versus the echo chamber of social media. But it just rolls off of him. There isn't that engagement, that negative engagement. They just don't seem as confrontational and as arrogant. And I like that. I think it sends a better message. One of the things too that I have always noticed in the sport is, and I see this changing too. If you go back 15 years, actually it's a little story, just real quick. I was at Junior USA's in 2009, and we all, not all, but the vast majority of us stepped to that next level, and we had this rude awakening. Even though we know what's coming, we don't know where we stand. So we get to the national level, and it's just a different ball game. It's just a different ball game, and it's not usually a work ethic. It's a genetic superiority. But whatever it is, it's the next level. And I remember the guy very clearly who was going to win my class. And I was there. Like, I was at a show, Junior USA's. It's not like it was USA's or Nationals. My first run on a national show. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go because there's this one specific guy in Colorado that I'd beaten 3 times, and he hadn't beaten me. And good guy, great guy. And he took second in the class the year prior. So I thought, you know what, I'll be competitive. I have a chance. I probably, fight for that top 5 spot. And I went, luckily or unluckily, on a year that, it was a tough field. So I did not place in the top 5.
Not to interrupt you. What class were you? What were you?
Light heavies. Light heavies. So of course, the deepest class, of course. But what struck me was at that time I was about 40 years old. So it was right around 2000. Maybe it was 2009. I had 4 kids at that time. The business was doing incredibly well. It had taken off about 4 or 5 years prior. Things were good. Life was pretty good. Happily married. My wife is awesome. But I was standing there kind of, we're getting ready for the night show and we're getting oiled and stuff. And the guy who was clearly going to destroy the class, I overheard him say to his friend who was tanning him or putting oil on him, he goes, yeah, man, I don't even know how I'm going to pay rent when I get back home. And it just hit me like a brick. I'm like, damn, I don't have to worry about that stuff. Like, you have traded. And I'm not, here's the thing. I don't care what I'm this type. I don't care what people do when it doesn't impact me. I don't care if you go out and you blow your money on Louboutin and, and things like that, and you can't afford it. You're driving a car you can't afford. I don't care about any of that. That I'm not that person. But it still struck me because I thought, man, you're so good at this. Like, it just clearly comes very natural. And you have this genetic, like, freak structure. You're going to go a long way in the sport. And this is what you're doing because there's not much else going on outside of the sport. And it was something that struck me. And it's something that I've always paid attention to because there are a lot of people like that who kind of an all your eggs in one basket type thing. And again, to each their own. But it's something that helped me moving forward to realize I have to keep the balance that I have with my family and my priorities outside of the gym as well, because how long is this going to last? I'm in love with this lifestyle and this, I call it a sport. I prefer to call it an industry because I don't think there's much sport to it, but we all know what I'm talking about when I say sport. So just to try to keep that balance and enjoy it. And, I'm 54. I've done it for a long time. I'll be training for 40 years. I trained for, it'll be 40 years. Actually, it's April now. So 40 years in April, since I was 14. I'm going to do it until I die. And it may well play a part in my death. There are things that we do throughout our lives. I don't jump out of airplanes because the thought of hitting the ground just doesn't seem very appealing to me. But if you like to jump out of airplanes, I appreciate the risks that you're taking. Or, you climb cliffs and, sheer cliffs and stuff with no cables. I think that's great. I think people who don't take risks, I think that's a pretty boring life I enjoy sitting on my couch and watching Netflix on a Saturday night, but that's after I've completed a week of something that is challenging to me and something that is gratifying to me personally. Someone else may think it's absolutely absurd, and that's fine. But to me, I'm good with that. So I can appreciate that there's passion, and I appreciate, this particular guy. I don't want to use his name because I don't, want to be disrespectful or have anybody judge him, but it just, I hope he's doing well. I hope at some point he did find a little bit more balance, because this is an endeavor. Bodybuilding is an endeavor that you can give 100% to. And I think a lot more people need to understand this and hear this. And I know they've heard it, but they need to understand it. You can give 100% to this endeavor and still have good relationships, a family, a career. It takes more work because you have to try to balance it. I remember in 2012, the longer I sat on that, it was very clear. The longer I sat on the computer, the more money I'd make. And my wife came to me one day and she goes, it's great that you're making all this money and we have nice shit and we can go nice places. And the kids like, all the sports they're doing and everything, but this is all you do. You get up, you sit on the computer, you go to the gym, and we don't, all the fun stuff is over here and you're on the computer. So I had to fight to find that balance. And quite frankly, it's always a fight, if I'm being honest, because you try to keep that pendulum in the middle, but sometimes it swings a little bit more to one side than the other. Hell, last 6 months, I didn't do as much work as I normally do. And I finally said, I'm like, you know what? That was a nice little break. It was chill, de-stressed a little bit. And then you jump back in. So the pendulum swings a little bit more. So I'm like, okay, I got to bring it back a little. There's just that constant fight for balance. And I'm sure you felt the same thing, right?
Yeah. I support my family doing this. So I think you and I are fortunate in that we've made it through those trenches, right? I don't really compete. I might get on stage again at some point in my life. I don't really foresee it happening. But this is what we still do, right? We're still in this industry. We're still making a difference, probably a bigger difference now, at least for me. You've probably you've made a significant difference for most of your career.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that impact is. I just know that it's it's one of those things, careful what you wish for, because it ends up, it's always so appealing from the outside looking in. And especially, I think, years ago, because not as many people were doing it. I used to have this, I don't want to say that I don't have pride now, because I do. I think I'm respected in the industry. I think I'm known as a person of integrity and a person who's honest and transparent, sometimes at my own expense, or people judging me. But I think that's only fair. I feel like if I make a mistake, and I've been in this game for 40 years, I think other people need to hear it, because other people make mistakes that haven't been in it very long. Mm-hmm. So if I can make a mistake like that, I don't want you to make that mistake, and save time and be more efficient with the decisions that you're making to help you skip a few steps. Yep. and save that time that I wasn't able to save. So the fact that I'm still relevant, I guess I'm happy for, but it's work. Eventually the novelty wears off, when you get into this industry, and especially as a coach, because let's be fair. I mean, everybody's a coach. As soon as you say you're a coach, you're a coach. We have high school kids who are coaching. Yep. It's and okay, you're not stealing clients from me, so do your thing. That's okay. But what it does is it waters down what we do. So as an example, when I go out, my wife is a career or professional, and she's been in her industry for a very long time. So when I meet people, they're up the ladder, with New York Life and these bigger companies, and they're dressed very well. I can dress well. I have no problem wearing a tie. In fact, I'd probably like to have a job where I wore a suit every day, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. So when I go to these functions and I'm asked, what I do, I admit I go to, that I write, and I downplay it. I don't say I write for the bodybuilding industry. Again, I'm not embarrassed. I'm not ashamed of it. What I don't want to do is I don't want to open the door to a conversation that these people don't understand. I don't want them to walk away going, oh, he's a personal trainer at 24-Hour Fitness. Boy, that's weird, because Melissa's, up the chain and she makes a lot of money, that sort of thing. It's like, I make pretty good money too. And I've been doing this a long time. I built it from nothing when no one else was, not no one else, but very few people were doing it.
Very few people were doing it.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. So what I do is I deflect. I tell them what I do, and I write. And I'm not lying. I do write. I've written for a long time. Quite frankly, I love writing. So I go with that, and I downplay the bodybuilding thing. If they ask me about bodybuilding, I try to change the channel back to them as quickly as possible. And the cool thing with people is it's very easy to get other people to talk about themselves. Yes. It's almost kind of a patronizing thing when they ask you what you do, because they don't really care. Mm-hmm. They're just making conversation. And I'm okay with that. I don't really care what you do when I'm, not you, but when I meet people that, that my wife works for, I don't give a shit. I don't know you. I am asking you what you do, or asking you about your family to make conversation, so that when I walk away, you think, oh, Melissa's husband is a really nice guy. Mm-hmm. I thought he'd be a dick because, of course, I'm a bodybuilder. I look like I have muscles, so they think I'm an arrogant asshole. So I want that satisfaction, or them to perceive me for what I am, because I don't think I'm a dick. I used to be a bit more of a dick than I am in my older age, but I want to be able to walk away and have people think, what, that's a pretty nice guy. It's a good fit. Him and Melissa, they're good people, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Like you said, it is always, I think there is always that balance that needs to occur, right? With life, with family stuff. And I think it is also rare to be able to make an actual career out of this industry, right?
Yes, it is.
There's a handful of us. Yep. Again, I'm newer at this, but I've been fortunate that I've been able to turn this into something that I can do for a living.
Mm-hmm. But you can't make people respect what you're saying. No. And they have to give you that respect, and they have to see value in the information that you're providing. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong too. If I just hammer them, if I just put out a lot of information, you're putting out the same information. These people are putting out the same information everybody else is. I don't know how many times I've thought, wow, yay for you. You've got all these followers. You just said something. Now you're a super genius, like Wile E. Coyote putting the nitroglycerin in the carrot while he's being wheeled to the train tracks. But we said that 20 years ago. So-and-so said that 15 years ago. Back on the boards, that was said. There's not a lot of, there's some, but there's not a lot of innovation. There's a lot of regurgitation. And I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose. They,
No, you're right.
I learn things from other people as well. So I may say something, and then there may be somebody older than me who goes, "Oh," and in fact, I got checked on it the other day. I posted something about an exercise. I was trying to. I'm in a gym that one of the gyms that I go to, and I love it, is a 24-hour gym because I hate racing the clock. I don't like to. What I want to say, I don't like to compromise my workouts, and I don't like to rush through or anything. So this one gym it's kind of limited. It's old school garage, but I love it. So it was a row thing on a hammer leg pull or leg press. So it's kind of a version of an angled barbell row in a sense.
Okay.
And I just said, this is what I do. I'm not being innovative. I'm not, creating something. If you have all this back equipment in your gym, then don't bother with it. But if you're limited, check this out. And a guy came on, one guy of all the comments. He's like, well, you need to reach out. He didn't type it this way, but this is the way I read it. Well, you need to reach out to Charles Glass and thank him for that one. I'm like, Charles Glass is like 400 years old. How am I going to keep track of every single thing this guy has said? I'm just putting it out there. So, I mean, it happens. And I get that. I understand that. But sometimes it's also a giant eye roll because you see that and you go, they're just standing there. It's like all the people who follow are like, oh my God, he's like this high wattage light bulb, but everything he says is gold. But I'm sure there are people who do the same thing to me. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're definitely going back to like you said before, you're definitely still relevant. So I'm friends with numerous guys that you work directly with as a coach, and you're held in very high regard.
I'm flattered to hear that. I do like that. There's some consolation and being in the game for a long time. I'll be honest with you. The fight for relevancy, I don't want to say it's a fight, but you want to stay relevant. Yeah. And it's hard with the younger competitors because they want to see parallels with the people. Sometimes they want to just attach. Matt Porter's a good example. The younger competitive generation saw him climbing the ladder and, his passion for competition and wanting to be, the best bodybuilder that he could. I would see that as appealing as well if I were in that age demographic and I were competing. I totally get that. So as an example, like a 25 or 28-year-old may not want to call on Skip. They may even think, this guy knows his shit. He's been around for a long time, but he's a Masters competitor and just not see that as a connection or a parallel. At the same time, I get some of those younger kids who are like, you know what? This guy's been around a long time. I'm going to go for the wisdom versus the status, if you will, of their trainer's current position, I guess, on the competitive ladder. And I'm going to go for the wisdom. And this guy's been around for a long time. He clearly knows what he's talking about. He has a track record of for 20 years, and that happens too. I'll admit that I've been very vocal, maybe too vocal in past years, where I'm not a big fan of young kids working with them because they get into that bro thing. Well, like I could tell them something that is sensical and logical and they get, but then they turn around and they're three bros who they're training with are like, oh, that's lame. You got to do this. And they're very influenced by that. And I get it. It's an age thing. So they're difficult to work with. However, the most difficult demographic has changed, and that's the older veteran old head. The old heads, the guys from the 80s, good luck getting them.
I have one guy that's going to nationals this year that's 63.
Nice.
And he's been competing since the 80s, but he's my oldest competitor.
Now, there are plenty who will listen to you and they will, there's kind of some reverence there of, hey, you know what you're talking about, I'm going to listen. But there's also those, I've been doing this they don't say it, but been doing this a long time. This has always worked. Well, if it's always worked, then what are you paying me for? It just doesn't make any sense. Now there's a team component too with the, with the trainer client. I approach it that way anyway. I am not, what I want to say, kind of a totalitarian trainer. This is how it's done. Don't question it. Just execute. And, I'm going to take into consideration. I need honest feedback. I need full, complete transparency. If you screw something up or you screw your diet up, you need to be comfortable enough and good with me to be able to tell me so that I know. But we need to be on the same page. Gear use is a good example of that. I'm not going to take on a client and say, this is what you need to take. First, for liability purposes, I need to be I'm careful with semantics. It may not matter in the end, but I'm careful anyway. I'm aware of it. And I need that client to be 100% on board with the dosing and the compounds that they're using, because I sleep well at night. I never want to have that on my conscience if something were to happen to a client that may not even be related, especially in the older demographic. I could have problems tomorrow. And of course, everybody would think, oh, it's because of steroids, when it could be completely not related to that, but that's what people are going to assume. So I need that client to be comfortable. I think when it comes to gear use, it's more of a personal decision than it is, this is exactly what you need to take. Because, we also have spouses who, may not, sometimes they just are not supportive of what goes on from a gear standpoint as well. I mean, I don't know if you've had them, probably have, but I have people who will literally hide their gear at their friend's house or at a storage unit. And honestly, I'm going to go on record and say I've been married for 30 years, happily married. There is no way that I would live that way.
No,
it's so unfair to the spouse. Now, maybe your spouse is being unfair by putting limitations on you. Maybe they don't understand and it's ignorance. But that's for you to help them, to help educate them on what you're doing, the precautions that you're taking, the blood work and things like that, what you're looking for and how you're monitoring things, so that they don't think you're being reckless. Because if your spouse thinks you're being reckless and don't care, that's not a good position to be in a relationship anyway. So it doesn't mean that because you have gear at your friend's house that you're cheating, but, or doing other, nefarious things. But if you get caught lying about gear,
it's worse than doing the gear.
The next question from your spouse is going to be, what else are you lying about? And it's going to go straight to you banging somebody else. I guarantee it. It's going to be going through their mind of, oh shit, well, where was he? What was he doing? There's going to be a lot of questions. You don't want to, it's one of those things I tell my kids all, don't lie to your spouse about something that you think is insignificant, because it doesn't matter. If you get caught, it's still a lie. And those questions will come out about bigger things, and there may be no truth to them, but it's going to create those questions, and you don't want to go down that road.
No, I agree. And I think you and I probably attract a similar demographic. I don't get a whole lot of young guys.
Right.
The ones that I've had tend to leave because they want to be reckless. And at least my understanding of the way I'm perceived is that I'm someone that's safe. It's like if a guy wants to compete or be a lifestyle client in a safe manner, I'm one of the coaches that they would typically choose. I think you also have that same reputation.
Yeah, I think so. Look, I have no problem going up in dose. I have no problem with larger dosing. I still have that mentality of don't take any more than you need.
Correct.
So if you need more and you're going to respond more or respond better to more, and the blood work and the sides and the symptoms are a fair trade, or they're non-existent, cool. I tell this story quite a bit because I think it's important. I did a cycle one time for almost 4 years. I was in my mid-30s. In fact, our youngest daughter was conceived at that time. Now, I'll admit that as good as my marriage was, I thought maybe there needs to be a test here. It just kind of, because I thought, I have 3 sperm, and unless they have S's on their chest and they're wearing capes, I'm not sure I know how this happened. So, 3.5 years. But the reason that I bring this up isn't to make fun of my wife and imply that she was cheating. She's about the most loyal, committed person ever to her family, which is a good way to be married for 30 years. But
probably the only way to be married for 30 years.
I know, exactly. To not have to question it. It really is a very secure. And my wife, people might think, oh man, she's probably just really fucking ugly. But she's not, I think she's hot. I don't expect everybody else to think she's hot, but no one would look at her and go, yeah, she's ugly. So anyway, I bring it up because during that 3.5 years that I was on, and I'm not saying like drop to TRT, I'm saying just a flat out cycle. I did my blood work and everything. And when I was in I always did blood work. I was one of the first, that small group that was like, you know what, this is going to be important. We need it. The Dante days, I mean, he was on Intense Muscle.
I'm gonna say Dante comes to my mind.
We would talk every day, and the group of us, the moderators and everything. And to the point where years later, Dante reached out to me. He's like, the board isn't that active anymore and everything else. Is there any way we can get rid of all that archived conversation that we had, because we never want that to come back and get into the wrong hands? And I ended up deleting that entire, the banter and the things that we talked about and discussed, personal, bodybuilding, gear. I mean, you name it. It could have implicated, it would not have been good. Let's put it that way. So it's better off that we got rid of it. The point is, I ran those, and I was high normal on everything. I was never out of range. And then in 2012, my doctor called me and goes, the lab screwed up your blood work. It's somebody else's blood work. Because all of a sudden it was just not good. So he's like, I'll call the lab. We'll get it straightened out. I'll call you in a couple of days. Everything will be fine. He called me in a couple of days. He goes, come in. We'll take we'll discuss this a little bit. And it was just, honestly, I think it was just an age. I wasn't cycling straight through on a straight cycle to 2012. But the point is it started to catch up with me around 2012. And I had to say, I had that question in front of me. It's like, you're 42. How much further are you going to go? You got smoked, junior USAs. You're not going to chase a pro. There's a little bit of reality, setting in. You're 42 every year. You got this, business, kids are getting older. Knew I was going to stay in bodybuilding because I just love the lifestyle. I will always do this, whether I can ever compete again in 12 or 15 or 20 weeks.
You and I should do a show together.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. The only thing is, I never tell anybody because I don't like to be under the microscope. So I'd have to show up and be like, "Oh, you're here," So I like to talk about it afterwards, because then I don't have people putting, especially because I'm older. I don't want people. I'll be honest. My position in the industry and everything else. I think that people would look at me. And this is an insecurity. I'm being transparent. Look at me and go, he's not as good as when he was, which doesn't mean that I was a great bodybuilder before. But I think even more so when you're a mediocre or slightly above mediocre about it, you don't want people to go, oh, he's just not that. He's good for his age. I don't want that. So I'm trying to enjoy the process and potentially get back on stage without all the attention. I want to just enjoy the process without, 40 people hitting me up going, hey, how's it going? Or if I have an injury, like I did in 2020, I was 5 weeks out, tore my glute. For the next 6-8 months, I'm explaining to people, oh, how did the show go? Oh, I heard you had an injury. I mean, it just goes on forever. And I can appreciate that people care enough to be curious and want to know. But I don't like explaining it over and over. And I don't know what's going to happen. Everything is great. I'm going week by week. I'm just literally going week by week. There are 2 people in my life that know what I want to do. And I only have to explain it to 2 people. And if something were to go wrong and I had an injury or something, they would know right away anyway. So there wouldn't be this long explanation. So it's just one of those things. I had those problems in 2012. I decided that I was going to back off. I went to TRT for 5 years, worked with a top endocrinologist in Denver to the point where he would bring all his interns in to the room because he didn't see anything. Endocrinologists typically deal with, and I'm sure you know this, the hormone levels of 50, 60, 70-year-old people,
or terminally ill people.
Exactly. So they're trying to keep the average Gen Pop person with like being able to function and not be depressed and arguably suicidal and think that their life is over and things like that. So it was a different thing for him, and it was a kind of a case study, if you will. And the question was whether my natural testosterone levels would actually come back if my HTPA would reset. And I told him that it would just take a while. And it took about 7 months and it started climbing and I wasn't using anything.
Good.
No PCT. I was just completely off.
I can explain. That's a really interesting subject too on its own, not to go on a tangent, but
nope, that's fine.
I get a lot of questions about PCT. So the outcome from using PCT or not is the same. So PCT was kind of a made up thing. It was made more of a mental thing to make you feel like you're doing something actively toward getting there.
If I do this, I have to do this. It's that I took this drug, so I need to take this drug to counter it. And being old school, we didn't have TR, we didn't have PC. I'm ready to say PCP. I can't even get TRT out. Let me slow down. But we didn't do the We just didn't. It's like, just be patient. You don't have to front load with all these orals because you're too impatient for blood levels to come up. Just be patient. And again, I don't want to again dog on the younger generation, but can you just wait? Like, are you trying to get to the finish line just as fast as you can get there, or do you enjoy the process?
No, they don't enjoy the process.
Right. That's what I say. So you just need to slow down. And here's the catch too. And I tell this to my clients all the time. This is another thing about the comfort level of clients. I tell them, I don't like PCT. I don't support it, or I don't recommend it, but I'll support it if that is what you insist on doing. And I explain to them and I give them my opinion. I always say, I'm going to give you my opinion, and then I'm going to support your decision in the end because it has to do with gear use. But PCT, it never needed to happen. If you end up that you need it, if we see that you need it, that's different. Some people,
sure,
they may need it. It may take you 8 months, but if it takes you 8 months to recover from a cycle, you're an outlier. You're the exception to the rule.
So much damage, right?
Exactly.
Like Mandrolone for a decade straight.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Absolutely. What do you expect?
Or they say, well, I'm only 32 and my test level's already in the toilet, and I know it's from the cycle that I did when I was 21 of pro hormone. And I try to explain that there's so many people in your age, in that demographic, in the age demographic, that testosterone levels are just lower, unfortunately, for a lot of people, for a myriad of reasons. That cycle may have had nothing to do with it.
Most likely it didn't, if it was that long ago.
Right. Exactly.
No,
it's like, well, you didn't recover for 14 years.
No,
come on.
No way.
Come on.
And depending on what part of HPTA you're talking about, like the pituitary gland recovers really fast.
Exactly.
Right? You could take growth hormone and be recovered at the night.
Mm-hmm. It's just and I understand. Here's the thing. I try not to get on people for ignorance, because if they just don't know, they don't know. That's part of the reason that they come to people like you and me. They want the answers that they don't have, or they want to ask the questions that they don't have the answers to. I get that. But when you get the information and then you set the information aside,
do it anyway,
then you're kind of being dumb because you have people telling you with wisdom and experience that this is important or this isn't as important, and you're disregarding that information because you've heard other information so repetitively that you can't accept that it's incorrect or it's wrong or it's just pure speculation. And and that's a big part of the industry as well. We I know early on we used to have to posit or hypothesize. Thankfully for us, the old school, message board type, our demographic, 98% of the things we said 20 years, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of this. I do. It ends up being correct and backed by studies. See, I'm not against studies. I want to be very, very clear on that. What I am against is when people rely on studies 100%, and it's the newer, it's the younger generation typically, but it's the newer lifter or the newer, but they're new to it. So I understand why they're trying to save time. They're trying to optimize, but you're disregarding, you're kind of setting aside wisdom and experience for studies that have so many different variables. Training is a good one. And there are names now that are doing really good things in the training industry, but they're also promoting, or they're implying is a better word, only relying on studies for training, like hypertrophy training specifically, because that's what I focus on. I'm sure they're doing it for strength training too. But when you post a video of this bizarre angle of a side lateral lying on an incline with your arm in this weird position, because the stretch position said in a study that number one, you're not big. You never were big. You haven't trained people who are big. So now all these people who listen to you are going to be doing this stupid exercise, taking up an incline bench, and it's taking twice as long because they're doing one side at a time. And that exercise is useless. And the reason that I know that is because the people who came before you are not stupid. We would have figured out that movement was good. Yeah. It's not like you just stumbled upon something and went, oh my God, this is. So there's a balance in there. You want the studies because you want them to back up or validate your experience or your wisdom. And when that happens, it's incredible. It has happened with skip loading. And I'm so fortunate for that, because I got bashed for years. There's still people who don't understand. And here's the thing, it's not for everybody. And I never have said this is the best way or the only way to diet. I never said that. There are a million ways to get to the top of a mountain, a million ways to come down for that matter too. But the point is you get to that, we're all going to end up in that same spot. So there's different methods and different ways to get to the end result, whether it's dieting, whether it's training, but there's still parallels in there. And there's things that are accepted that work and are more efficient specific to that person. Yeah. So it's not that, I just said this a couple of days. It's not that skip loading doesn't work. I proved that it works. It's pretty much not it. I'm not even going to debate it with anybody. It may not be for you, because psychologically there are people who struggle with, I just need to stay away from those heavier types of foods because I don't have any control, or I can't turn the switch off. I get that, but don't blame my method for
your
that.
Diet. Yeah,
exactly. That's a discipline that you don't have because you're not able to turn it on and turn it off. So those people tend to thrive on what I call the antiquated, or I don't want to say starvation because that's not fair, but that very, very black and white, boring, bland, this is your meal, eat it. This is your meal with more carbs. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. It works. There's no question it works. But I'll tell you this, because it's going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but it's true. Prior to skip loading taking off, refeeds were nowhere near as frequent.
No.
Load meals were nowhere near as, you can call it whatever you want. You don't have to call it skip loading, because I didn't create something that hadn't, it had been there before. It just wasn't being utilized as frequently and by as many people. Dan Duchesne with the Body Opus diet.
We've all done it for years.
Right, exactly. And we've all realized, even before, I remember back in the late 80s and early 90s, you go and you just have a cheat meal. You go out with your friends because you're 20 and you eat 3 burgers, and the next day you look insane and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm leaner a week later.
It was just made
it's there. It just wasn't put in front of you as a spoon-fed method of this is how you do it. And then taking that method and kind of tweaking it and making it better and better over 20 years. And that's why people who skip loaded with me, there are so many pros out there now that I worked with when they were 2 years into bodybuilding and no one knew who they were. And that may be the only time that they skip loaded. So they have, this, when they hear it today, skip loading. And a lot of them say, they'll message me. Roman Fritz, I love the dude. He's like, he goes, they can say whatever they want. He goes, I'm telling you, I will never stop doing it. And it is part of the reason that I'm in the condition that I'm in. And I say part because we know that there are other issues too that feed that. It's a puzzle piece. There's no question that it's a very integral, there's a lot going on with that system, but it's a part. Yeah, it's an integral part. So it's good to see that, and to see the studies come around now and talking about leptin and ghrelin and the things that feed. It's not, I didn't know anything. If you just said leptin and ghrelin to anybody, 17 years ago, even 10 years ago, people are like, what the hell's that?
Yeah. And this, I'm just go with the study thing, because you see with the hormone stuff too, not just exercise. It's twofold. One, the average person doesn't have the access to the full study, right? They're reading an abstract.
Yeah.
You're pulling it out of one paragraph. Mm-hmm. And two, they've never taught, and it doesn't have to be formal education. They're just never taught how to read a study and what to do with those numbers, right? So that's an art in and of itself.
Listen, I don't know half of those words. I have a very good vocabulary. I think I'm pretty good. I can speak well. I think I'm relatively articulate. I can write well. I can't read half of the words in a study, Kurt.
Yeah, so what I do is I don't know if you follow me on Instagram. I interpret these things and I repost them as.
And thankfully you do that, because I'm going to start sending you things I come across, because I'll start to read and I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's great. And then it just starts, and I'm like,
it's all I do all day.
It's like Chinese to me.
But I find the amount of mistakes you see, and this is where it gets worse with the internet. So and the same with training and gear and food, all these things, you see these misinterpretations of these things that then get parroted and then spread, and they become this gospel.
Right.
And you actually look at the original study. I can name a million of them. The Anavar burns belly fat. If you actually looked at that study, you'd be like, that's not what this study says. Or if you look at estrogen and IGF, That's not what those studies from Tremblant are saying. You're dealing with cattle, not humans. They're not even looking at the right species of person, right species of animal. Yeah. All of these things. Same with the exercise stuff is the same as the drug stuff. They're done on, healthy, trained individuals who are 18 that have been working out for 6 months, right? Or elderly people who have knee surgery. How does that apply to a pro bodybuilder?
And that's where the industry, we get into trouble, because if you're well respected in the industry and people are listening to you, you're influencing a lot of people, maybe not even because you're trying to. That again, we put out information, but it's up to the people who listen to that information to decide whether they respect it, whether it's truthful, and whether they're going to pass that information on or not. We have such a huge obligation, if we're being listened to and we're respected in the industry, to make sure that what we're saying is solid, unless you say, this is my opinion.
Yes.
And I'm going to get right now, I'm in the middle of getting my ducks in a row to revitalize my YouTube channel, because I've been lazy and not been focused on it. And part of the reason is because I don't like some of the information that's out there. Doesn't mean everything is bad, but I figure, you know what, there's a lot of training. I'm going to focus on training, but at least to start putting out my opinions. And one of the first things I said is, it's not going to be study based. It's going to be literally, because I'm not going to argue with anybody. I'm going to give my opinions based on my experience over the years of what I feel is sound training advice. And I think there's just some things that I don't agree with, and I'm going to put those things out there, but it's going to be, this is my opinion, because that takes 95% of the argument. You can argue that you don't agree with my opinion. That's fine. But I don't like the people in the industry, and there are some names that I would love to mention right now. And if it were 15 years ago, I'd mention them. But speaking in absolutes, it's something that I don't allow in our family.
I don't do.
I say, I do not use the word never and ever. Well, I rarely use the word never and ever. And when I do, it's because I am 100% sure. It's something that is factual. And if it's an opinion, you just can't do that. It's not fair. It's like busting your kid because you think they did something wrong. I need to know that you did it wrong, because if I bust you and I'm wrong, that's just not fair. You're going to carry that through life and be like, oh man, my dad's kind of a prick, man. I didn't even do that. I did the other 5 things, but I didn't do that. So, it's just not fair. So speaking in absolutes is something I think that with people who have a solid position in the industry, you have to be careful with the information you're putting out, because other people are going to pass that on. It's no different than being on Facebook and sharing a meme about Leah, Thomas having to turn in all her medals for the, it just doesn't happen. But because your friend posted it and you're sharing it, you're helping to spread bullshit and inaccurate information. And we wonder why there's so much bullshit information. That's why.
Yeah. I on my social media, on my YouTube channel and on Instagram, I'm constantly either redacting things that I have said that I now realize are not the truth anymore.
Sure.
Or
that's big, because people don't do that.
Opinions. And the problem is I don't agree with a lot of the things, where you're more, I'll do training on with some things, but like definitely with the gear usage and AIs and all this, I unfortunately, I don't agree with the current stance on a lot of these things. And I'm not afraid to say it.
Yep.
Everyone just seems to parrot what everyone else is doing, and unfortunately, there's a lot of harm that's being done in the industry with things.
There is. Yeah. Taking an exercise and putting a big red circle. And I understand why too, because when you speak in absolutes, more people tend to listen to you because they like black and white information. I do understand that, but then you have to get into the ethical component of it too, and what your motivation is for doing it. And I can see the motivation for the people who do it, because they got to make money. And when it comes down to it, that's really all they care about. They're pretty convinced, no question. They're convinced that their information is accurate. That I do believe. But then it becomes this nasty confrontation, and we're calling out other trainers and stuff, which part of me likes, because that's how the message boards used to be. You had to actually earn the ability to give information, and for your information to be respected. In this day and age on social media, it's a funny thing, because It was Adam McVeigh, who referred to social media first as an echo chamber. And I never liked the guy. I'll be honest. And I know that that may sound like, disparaging because he's passed. But anybody who knows me knows that I'm not disrespectful like that. I'm just calling a spade a spade. The guy was a genuine asshole. And that's just it. I met him personally. My wife's like, you're going to go meet him? I'm like, yeah, he's in Breck, with his family. I'm going to go up there. He wanted to meet me. He wanted to get together. So I drove up there, which was only about an hour away, and 30 minutes. I thought I literally thought he'd be different in person. Like it's just an online persona, that sort of thing. But now he's just as much an asshole in person. And the more he drank, and I was sitting there, I don't drink, he's just getting hammered. And he just became more of a dick. The reason he wanted to talk to me was he was having problems with his marriage, and I'd been married so long. And I told him, I said, you're making a huge mistake. You assume that I have answers to the perfect marriage and I have secrets, and I don't. I listen to my wife. She listens to me. We work our shit out. And, we try not to hold, things against each other. And we're fortunate enough, I think, being married that long, sometimes it's fortunate enough that you have the parallels and you have the ability and the desire to work through things. Some people do, some people don't. Anyway, when he knew he wasn't getting much information, or any secrets from me, I think that helped him to drink more too, because he knew he was in trouble with his marriage and I couldn't help him. But the point is, he called it an echo chamber. And I'm like, what did he tell you? It was a kind of a snide remark to me one day, but he was right. It is, in the sense that if you don't like what someone is saying, or they're going to argue with you, you just block them. You don't have to listen to, this is my page. These are my opinions. It wasn't like that on the message boards. You wanted to be a part of the community and you wanted to be respected. So you would fight. You would either, if you were going to say something and you wanted to argue or debate, you were going to bring your A game. And if you got smoked, you just kind of slid back into the crowd, and you still wanted to be a part of the community. You weren't like expelled or trying to think of the church term, but anyway, you
excommunicated.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, or blackballed, or whatever you want to call it on social media. And I think that's why you'll take a shot at somebody, or somebody will take a shot at you, and they know they're going to get blocked. They don't care. They said their piece and they're done. So it is a bit of an echo chamber in that sense, and I think that limits the information as well. It's just really too bad that the message board era is gone. And it's an old thing to say. I get it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But yet it comes back in the form of Reddit and Quora, and it's a weird thing. But it is a bit of an echo chamber. So you can say what you want. If they disagree with you, then you block them and you don't have to deal with them. It is what it is.
And people don't like that anymore.
Nope. Well, the old guys don't.
Yeah.
We want to go back.
What was I going to say? Do you have any parting words for people?
Yeah, listen, I'm a long-winded. I've done this for 21 years. I work at home. I get to talk to nobody. My wife won't go anywhere to the store with me. She won't go to the post office because I will just talk. I don't get to talk. So yeah, don't ask me for parting words, because I could go another 3 hours. And this is something that obviously, even after the amount of time I've spent in the industry, I just love it. I'm passionate about it, but I don't like to talk about it when it's not bodybuilding time. So as an example, if I'm going out with people at night with my wife, the last thing I want to talk about is bodybuilding. I want to talk about other things that have nothing to do with picking up heavy things and putting them down. How much I bench, obviously nothing about gear. That's something that I don't talk about unless I know that person has a knowledge, a bit of a knowledge base. And nutrition, same thing. So nope, I'm a writer. If you meet me out in public or through any functions with my wife, I just write.
Very cool, Skip. Well, I appreciate it so much.
I appreciate you having me on. It's always good to just shoot the shit.
Yeah, definitely, man. I will put your contact information down below if people want to get in touch with you. You're obviously a coach, been a coach for a long time, very successful one. And you have a YouTube channel and Instagram and all those things. I'll link all that stuff down below. So
very cool. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you, sir.
Have a good one.